Okay, so hello everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today for our briefing on the Rohingya crisis 5 years on. My name is Sarah Sheffer, and I'm the Vice President for Strategic Outreach at Refugees International. We want to express our sincere thanks to our speakers and advocacy partners who helped bring this briefing together today. Before we hand over to our speakers, a couple of housekeeping notes. Today's briefing is on the record and will be recorded. We have a recording and transcript of our call available later today, shortly after we wrap. If you'd like to follow up with any of our speakers for interviews, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'll put my email address in the chat so that we can be in touch. But in any case, we'll have time for questions on the line after our speakers present. So now it's my distinct honor to turn things over to our moderator for today's call, Weiwei Niu. Weiwei is a former political prisoner and founder and executive director of the Women's Peace Network in Burma. She is also a visiting senior research fellow at the Human Rights Center of the UC Berkeley School of Law. Weiwei spent 7 years as a political prisoner in Burma. Since her release from prison in 2012, she has dedicated herself to working for democracy and human rights, particularly on behalf of marginalized women and members of her ethnic group, the Rohingya. So Weiwei, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for your kind introductions. Hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Weiwei Niu. I'm very honored to moderate this discussion today. And the purpose of today's event is to mark 5 years since the start of the crisis and assess the current situations of Rohingya refugees and conditions in the camps as told by refugees themselves, and galvanize support for improved humanitarian conditions and accountability for the crimes committed by the Myanmar military. As many of us know and have experienced ourselves, the consequences of the genocide and violence in 2017 continue today in Myanmar and across the world. Particularly over 1 million Rohingya who have sought refuge since then in Bangladesh continue to live in increasingly deteriorating conditions with limited access to basic needs and livelihood, such as healthcare, education, and even safe drinking water. They are also in serious dangers of facing heightened securitizations as well as arrest and detention. In addition to the some sort of coercive relocation to Bashangsha. It needs no reminder that all refugees want to safely and voluntarily go home. Yet Rohingya are prohibited from achieving this as Burmese military brutalized the entire country after the February 1st coup. So today we are going to hear from our experts from the Rohingya and international community about the situations in Bangladesh camps. And I am honored to introduce our speakers today. Unfortunately, one of our speakers is not able to join due to an emergency situations. So now we have 3 speakers. First, we have Omay Salma. Omay Salma is a Rohingya women activist living in Kutupalong refugee camp in Bangladesh. She is committed to empowering women and girls in the camp through her organization, Literacy and Handicrafts for Rohingya Women. And we have Go Kemal. Go Kemal is the founder and executive director of Rohingya Youth Association in Cox's Bazar refugee camps, which works on youth empowerment and peace education and human rights advocacy. He has tirelessly advocated on behalf of the Rohingya community to the global audience through media interviews. And we are so honored and privileged to have him at the last minute. Thank you so much, Ko Kemal, for joining us. And lastly, not the least, we have Daniel Sullivan. And Daniel Sullivan, Dan is the Deputy Director of Africa, Asia, and Middle East at Refugee International. He focuses on Myanmar, Sudan, South Sudan, and other areas affected by mass displacement. Dan has 2 decades of human rights and foreign policy experience, previously working with the United to End Genocide, formerly Save Darfur, the Brookings Institution, Human Rights First, and the Albright Stonebridge Group, where he assisted former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright in her role as co-chair of the Genocide Prevention Task Force. So welcome everybody, and welcome Gokima, of course, and Omay, Salma, and Dan. So to kick off our discussion today, I would like to begin by asking Omay to provide a short initial remark and addressing overall conditions of the refugees in the camp, as well as in particular situations of women and girls in relation to access to education, health, or livelihood. The floor is yours, Omay.
Thank you, dear, for introducing me. So, yeah, I want to share shortly some of our conditions, what through we are going. As people say that to destroy people, it is not necessary to kill them. It is only deny them from education. Education is required for our safety and well-being. So, if you want to know, I'm joining from Cosbazar Rohingya community. So I'm also a camp-based organization. I'm running a also camp-based organization. So I'm amplifying my voice on behalf of the webinar that we Rohingya are deprived of access to quality education in Myanmar due to systematic marginalization. It's 5 years. 5 years ago, when we Myanmar military and extremist civilians we are committing genocide and crime against humanity upon Rohingya, we had no space for Rohingya to flee to protect our life. Our tested friend country Bangladesh open border and save hundreds of Rohingya families under attack by Myanmar's military. We are grateful for Bangladesh to continuing support us. It is incredible support at the national and international levels. We are feeling for saving our life, we leave everything behind. We bring our land and property except for the knowledge that we acquire in schools. We know that the Bangladesh and international community is not against of our education. They allow Jews to run formal education, formal school for grade 1 to 4 in some place, but not every camp yet. However, those are not enough because UNICEF said there are 4 lakh school-age Rohingya children in the Bangladesh refugee camp. However, NGOs run nearly 3,400 informal learning centers across the multiple camps, which only cover grade 1 to 4. However, from 2020 to 21, those schools were closed and COVID-19. To that, most of the children have been learning through the so-called Learning Competency Framework approach, LCAP, which is cover level 1 to 4, primarily to children age 4 to 40. The LCAP was created as an emergency measure for Rohingya refugee children is a largely informing learning system, Due to continuously lack of quality education and income sours their livelihood program, most of the people fleeing to Malaysia. Within last year, nearly like 600 Rohingya refugees have fled to Malaysia from the camp. Among them, only 45% were able to reach Malaysia, according my observation. The rest couldn't reach their destination as some of were arrested in different places and some died on their journey. Few are still missing. It's an horrific, it is an very bad situation for Rohingya community, as almost Rohingya going damaged, our community going damaged. And also lack of education, Rohingya girls mostly suffering. Rohingya girls have been victimized by domestic violence and child marriage after coming Bangladesh, because mostly suffering child marriage from child marriage. After coming in Bangladesh, child marriage become very common in our community, because as parents and girls, also boys, they had hope that we could get married after graduation, be whatever we want to be when we were in Myanmar. But here in the camp, there is no hope, no choice, no. So they're deciding to get early marriage, especially girls' parents deciding to get early marriage their daughter, because we don't have enough space to live all the family member, both in one shelter, because shelter is very small. So who don't have knowledge about marriage, so they have to suffer domestic violence. Who can suffering, they should get divorced lately. Especially most of the girls are sent to Malaysia to get married, as their parents can't pay the amount of demanded money, dowry demanded by the boy's family. Because boy's family, because we are only receiving ration from the WP, even that is not enough for us. It is except we don't have any other opportunity to earn and to get it. Only we are receiving WP ration. Since the 2020 and 2021 continuously largest people become jobless in the camp. So our condition becoming drug day by day. So I request to the international community to focus deeply on this issue. My another request, we need formal education with a certificate, so that after returning to Myanmar, we will show that this testimony for getting into enrollment in Myanmar. Education is fundamental human right for every Rohingya child. All UN members said, including Bangladesh, introduced the 2018 on Global Rohingya Compact, which is called refugee children to be enrolled in the quality education within 3 months. But it is 5 years, we are not getting any opportunity for formal education. We request all the stakeholders, international universities and UN agencies and donor countries to invest more in education, to create an educational environment for Rohingya youth and girls, where we will get higher education with safety and security. Thank you everyone for hearing patiently my.
Thank you very much, Omay, for reminding us how denial of education can destroy a people, a group, and how Burmese military used it as a tactic, and the situations of the women and girls, in particular, access to educations in the camps and their challenges. We are so grateful that you are here. Thank you so much again for sharing with us. Now that I would like to turn to Go Kemal. Go Kemal, could you share us a bit more about the conditions in the camps, especially around livelihood security and other concerns that you may have? And I'll give floor to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we hear you well.
Yes, this is the Kimong. I am from the world's largest refugee camp. I would like to thank for inviting me, especially Ma Weiwei, for giving the chance to share our suffering and our voice. As you know, the challenges in the refugee camp community inside in the Bangladesh are many. We have no security, we have no future, no freedom of movement. Violence are very common in the refugee camp, including sexual and gender-based violence. Yet there are neither mechanism for protection or accountability. This is the very unsurprising thing we see from the international community or ING who are calling and saying gender-based violence always, but they did not make any mechanism protection theory in the refugee camp. That's they are saying. This input all the refugees, but particularly women and girls are major risks. And we all have responsibility to find out a solution. Our ability to build a future is being denied because we do not have access to education in the refugee camp of southern Bangladesh. There is no formal education for the refugee children since 2017. Civil society private learning centers led by Rohingya youth have been shut down. This has made it increasingly difficult to gain access to information needed to achieve a future free of violence. We thank for hosting the Rohingya community to the Bangladesh and the people of Bangladesh. Bangladesh has provided a critical lifeline, but we do not want to depend on the Bangladesh government forever. Our people must have access to education. Unfortunately, to date, UNICEF have been silent this issue. We hope they and you will stand with us together from now to make better solution for the Rohingya community. There is no free movement for the Rohingya refugee in the camp. There are movement restrictions within camp. We cannot stay at night in different camps. Let alone allowing the people outside camp line, people cannot leave the camp to fulfill their basic necessary need or visit their relative and the family. Think about our situation like the part living in the cage. There is much Bangladesh could do for us if they try. With the further international support to improve the life and livelihood of the Rohingya people. But Bangladesh cannot provide the long-term solution that our people need. To address the need of our people, we must look to the root cause of the crisis in Myanmar. As you know, our priority and has always been to return home. Our homeland in Myanmar, our objective to secure a free, voluntary, and dignified repatriation to our place of origin, Arkan state in Myanmar. But we cannot return to a place where we will be forced to fail again, where we are treated as a subhuman and where it's just a matter of time. Before our home burned down to the ground, we cannot return to a place where we have no path to citizenship. As you know, the junta has no political willingness to accept back the Rohingya refugee. Unfortunately, right now we see the same attitude of the Arkan army. When the junta and the military regime of Bangladesh government talking about the repatriation, the Arkan army has started violence and the fighting against the military in the Arkan state. Mostly the place where the Rohingya live or live in right now. This is the one of the things we can conclude that Arkan army is also the same version of the Myanmar military or previous Aung San Suu Kyi lead NLD government. It means NLD lead government, military or Arkan army are all of the same version of again the Rohingya community. They are implementing their national policy. Rohingya people inside Arkan state in Myanmar have no free movement, no job, no education, little access to healthcare. The situation now worsen as we face these risks from the junta and also Arkan army. Rohingya are treated as a foreigner in their own land, denied the most basic right. None of this create conditions for a free, volunteer, and dignified return. The condition is a blocking for the peaceful repatriation because Arkan is not the safe place for us till now. Unfortunately, the Rohingya have been excluded from discussing regarding our own future in the Bangladesh side, in the Myanmar, even the NGO. For example, the UNHCR, WFP, IMO are the responsible NGO in the refugee camp. We never have the right to speak out with them. We never have the right to involve their discussion. We are very unhappy when we see this kind of the injustice ongoing by the international NGO. They should respect and focus the human rights and their code of conduct. We have not been invited to participate in the negotiation about the repatriation between UNHCR, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. We have no detail on the MOU that is made to guide our return home. We have been denied a voice in high-level consultation on repatriation, which are the key to return home. I urge as a community on behalf of you, you have the right to speak out on behalf of the Rohingya community. We have the right to speak out when we need to assess the view of our included. That we are not sidelined. No one has a greater stake in our repatriation than we Rohingya. And we must have a seat at the table when these discussions are considered and ultimately met. The other part of the solution in the political, the Rohingya for decades have been marginalized and excluded from the transition process from the government side, and right now we see this kind of thing from the international NGOs. This include this include in 2020 election, which the Rohingya could not vote into take part of the in Arkan state. This is the one of the things we are always excluded from the champion of the human right and democracy. Once the international NGO, European Union, all the world support the Aung San Suu Kyi to get the something in the Myanmar, but in her government time we face all the things. The thing is that we are very unfortunate and very upset when international community declare those elections is legitimate, but Rohingya are not getting any right of the vote and they participate as a parliament member. The junta took over the power in 2021 was a consequence of this bloc's approach, what the military is saying. These include pressure on the opposition, also the NUG. The policy statement on the Rohingya also good, but we have a little bit, difficult to believe that because they are not yet sincere. We have to early to speak out against them, but we are waiting their solution. So for the Rohingya issue, we must address political transition and the Rohingya crisis together. We cannot treat this as a separate and related issue. Rohingya is one of the most persecuted minority in the world. Know the world, two of the world, international code of justice, international criminal code are ongoing the Rohingya issue. Unfortunately, we see in the Bangladesh refugee camp, some the NGO are very key point, but they always excluded any making decision process. My sister mentioned before about the learning center. So many learning center was shut down by the government, by the help of the NGO. They targeted this kind of the learning center because due to the private learning center, the children are not going to the NGO leaders, the so-called the learning center. Just the students are willing to go to the community-based learning center because they are the community learning center providing quality education. NGO learning center are not providing quality education, so children are not going to there. Parents are not willing to send their school to their children to the NGO lead school. So NGO are targeting the community learning center and community school. This is the thing when we see, we are very surprised. Why international NGO are acting same the military act in our community long time. Another thing we already consider when the Ukraine and Russia aggressive, the international funding on the Rohingya issue decreasing. But in the refugee camp, when we see in 2017, the half of the targeted budget enough. But in right now, this is not enough for just a little bit covered. Why? The same situation right now we are facing, there's no difference when the half of the, for example, when the half fund is enough for us, at that time, the same situation, right now, the same situation we are facing. It means there is no fund, the transparency using the fund by the international NGO and the international NGO. When they are not getting the fund, they can attend the same issue. When they are getting the enough fund, they are attending the same issue. It means the funding by the international NGO or the international donor or UN or European Union are not transparently using by the NGO in the refugee camp. This is the one of the my observation. Quickly I want to respond about their funding issue. No, we all have to work together to find out the solution. If you cannot start the quick repartition, international NGO have the responsibility to make better solution for the Rohingya in the refugee camp. We always say gender-based violence, but we cannot implement any single a strong protection mechanism for the female. What NGO are doing in the refugee camp? This is one of my question, because we always see article and the presentation and the webinar. They are saying the common issue in the refugee camp is the gender-based violence. Of course, I agree on that. But I do not see there any kind of their practical action. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Gokemal. You touched so many important issues here, from the lack of security to deteriorating livelihood conditions in the camps, as well as the lack of quality education for refugee children, women and girls, and lack of freedom of movement, restricted, limiting the movement of the Rohingya refugees in the camp, even within the camps, not only going outside of the camp. So I think these are really, really great points. And in addition to that, you touch, I must say, two critical points. One, around the repatriation, voluntary, dignified return to home, and the frustrations and concerns in Burma by the Burmese militaries, the ongoing practices, genocidal practices of the Burmese militaries, and threat from the Arakan army, and so on. And I think the last points that you touch here is really critical. I think it's around the voices of hearing the voices of the Rohingya community itself, and having the voices of Rohingya, how not having the voices of the Rohingya at the center could cause like misunderstanding as well as frustrations within the communities. And therefore you touch that any decision related to the Rohingyas matter Rohingya should involve, and exclusionary tactics, whether by the governments or NGO, is not working. It's clearly saying that. So I appreciate touching those points, as well as a concern around the funding and shortage of funding. Obvious, the one of the issue that a lot of experts and humanitarian institutions are highlighting, etc., and misunderstanding between all of these situations. And I think these are really, really great points, and we appreciate you highlighting those points. Now I would like to turn to Dan. Dan, would you like to provide your brief remark and touching on anything else you want to cover on the situations in the camps, perhaps Bashang Shah situations or anything else, and also international responses to the Rohingya crisis, including U.S. genocide determinations and so on. So the floor is yours, Dan. Go ahead.
Thank you, Wei Wei, and thanks to Omay and to Kin Mong. So I'm a deputy director with Refugees International, and I've been working on the Rohingya for advocacy for the better part of my career of over 20 years, and I've had the chance to work with people like Omay and Kin Mong and Wei Wei. And so would first just associate myself with their remarks, and you've heard directly what the camp's situation is like. So what I wanted to do as an independent advocacy organization that has traveled to the camps and has worked with policymakers is to try to identify some of the key ways forward on policy. And so just briefly, I'd like to highlight 5 key priorities, policy priorities, now that as we mark this 5 years since genocide against the Rohingya. So first is the need to address the root causes. The same military that carried out the genocide against the Rohingya has carried out a coup and is wreaking havoc all around the country. As you've heard from the Rohingya speakers, and I heard from many others, there's a very consistent note of a desire to return home to Myanmar when the conditions are safe and when their rights are recognized and their citizenship is recognized. Unfortunately, under this military, this is that's not something that those conditions are not there right now. So there's a real need to put pressure, international pressure, on the Myanmar junta to end the abuses that it continues today. And there's a number of steps that can be taken, including further coordinated targeted sanctions, including on the oil and gas sectors, a global arms embargo, and support for accountability. And all of these kind of measures are included from a U.S. policy perspective, are included in the Burma Act of 2021-2022. And so that is something that's in the Senate right now, and something that we really urge to move forward as a very clear, direct sign to the military junta that the United States is serious about addressing these root causes. And that also includes authorization of further humanitarian aid. Which brings me to the second point, main key priority is to sustain and increase the humanitarian aid that is needed. Because the reality is that in the short to medium term, many of the Rohingya are going to remain displaced in other countries, particularly in Bangladesh. And right now, the joint response plan for the humanitarian response in Bangladesh for the Rohingya is less than 25% funded. So there's clearly a need for sustained and increased funding. I would also expand that to other populations that have suffered in Myanmar, who have been displaced. And so there's a need for increased aid, finding ways to get it into Myanmar, including one of the readily available paths through across the border from Thailand. The third key priority is to ensure that Rohingya rights are respected in the camps in Bangladesh and that conditions are improved. We've heard about the concerns of lack of access to education or very limited access to education, lack of freedom of movement, including barbed wire that's been put around the main camps. And then a very serious issue that we continue to hear and have warned about is the movement of now over 20,000 Rohingya to an island in the Bay of Bengal, Bhashan Char. We continue to hear very serious concerns about how voluntary that process is, how truly informed the Rohingya who are moved there are, and how sustainable the keeping people on that island really is. And I think just seeing continued reports of people trying to leave the island just shows the questions of how voluntary that really is. And as has been mentioned in terms of education, there are some opportunities, but used by the Bangladeshi authorities. But at the same time, we've seen private learning centers being shut down, and on the same in the same token, livelihood opportunities where we've seen informal shops that Rohingya have set up to try to find a way to be self-reliant. We've seen those destroyed by camp authorities. So there's a lot more that needs to be done to improve the situation. The United States and other countries can also help by working with Bangladesh to provide for resettlement of Rohingya refugees. That's not going to be a solution for the majority. And again, most Rohingya do want to go home to Myanmar, but in the intermediate term, should be part of the solution. The fourth priority is on making sure that Rohingya are included in the future of Myanmar. We've seen, it's very important that the United States support the opposition to the coup, the opposition to the military, the National Unity Government, and other bodies that are representing people. But we need to make sure that the Rohingya are included in that. We've seen since the coup a change in some of the attitudes that other people in Myanmar have towards the Rohingya, increased empathy, believing now what the military has done to the Rohingya and others. And that's something that the United States and others should support, but need to make sure that Rohingya are included in those future plans. And then fifth, the final priority I'd like to highlight is the need for accountability. We've seen some very significant progress on this, where the UN had a independent investigative mechanism set up, a fact-finding mission. The United States earlier this year finally came around and said that this had a genocide determination, that what the Myanmar military has committed against the Rohingya does constitute genocide. And we've seen some funding to support collecting evidence. What needs to happen is a lot more. First of all, the U.S. and other countries can formally join with the case before the International Court of Justice, and just in general, I think just needing to push things forward through any path towards accountability, including through the International Criminal Court, or through some of the cases through universal jurisdiction that are out there. So that's a key point to addressing the issue, because there can't really be a way out of this. There can't really be a path out of genocide if you don't address this cycle of impunity that has been continuing. So those are the 5 key priorities: addressing the root causes, increasing humanitarian support, ensuring that the Rohingya rights are respected and conditions improved in the camps, including Rohingya in the future of Myanmar, and supporting accountability. I'd say that the most immediate thing that is available to address these, that captures a lot of those priorities, is the Burma Act that is before the U.S. Senate. So we just really urge that step be taken. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan, for highlighting the need to address root causes and providing us with comprehensive roadmap. And yeah, we appreciate that. Definitely Burma Act has everything that we need, almost everything that we need, and that would allow the administration to really be able to effectively support the Rohingya community in Burma and Bangladesh, as well as have more effective policy response. So now I'd like to turn to our press media friends. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and ask questions to our speakers directly, or any way you want. Like, yeah, please feel free to ask the questions, raise your hand, or just, since we have a small group of people, you can just turn on your speakers and ask them directly as well. So maybe we don't have any question. If that's the case, I would like to ask Omay and Go Kemal and Go Dan, if you have any other topics or issues that you want to cover or add to what we have discussed already. I think a few areas that we haven't been able to touch really is around access to healthcare and access to food and nutrition, etc. How the situations in the camp, how Rohingyas are surviving daily basics, and stuff like that. If you want to share anything else. And Omay also highlighted around the issue around people fleeing the camps and not actually reaching to the destination or safe haven in Malaysia, and why people are choosing to take this risky journey, and why increasingly people are choosing to leave the camps. Who would like to go first?
Umay, do you maybe want to take the question about why people, concerns about people leaving the camps, why they're leaving? Or maybe I can just start by saying, yeah, I think it's been a concern over many years that tens of thousands of people, dating before 2017, even have left the camps in Bangladesh for Malaysia and other places. And we saw in 2015 there was a boat crisis where there were tens of thousands of people who were stranded, both Bangladeshis and Rohingya, when there was a crackdown on some of the trafficking routes. And at that time, there were countries like Thailand, Malaysia, who were not allowing them to come to shore. And we see that continues to be a concern where people who are stranded on boats are not always allowed to come to shore. So that's another thing in the longer term that needs to be addressed, is a regional kind of agreement to allow for safe disembarkation and addressing why people are coming and making sure that if they have claims to asylum, they're able to pursue those.
Go Kemal and Omay, do you like to add anything on that?
May I know question again? I will.
So there are increasingly people are choosing to leave the camps, to leave, to go to Malaysia, or even some people are even trying to return to Myanmar by bribing the authorities and so on. I mean, it's a very small number of people, but who are trying to return to Myanmar, but majority of them are leaving for Malaysia or other countries. Why do you think people are choosing to leave the camps?
Yeah, this is the great signal the Rohingya community has given to the international community, that we are not happy in the refugee camp. It is not enough for us. We are not safe. We lost everything. So they choose their way. For example, if I say about the Malaysia issue, mostly the female are going there. But in the refugee camp, they have so many difficulty. In my speech, I already mentioned the gender-based violence are common in the refugee camp, but there is no protection mechanism for them. They take in the protection themselves by choosing the death of Johnny. If we want to focus to stop the female on going to the Malaysia, first we have to address the production issue in the refugee camp. For example, there is a lot of things when we talk with the female, we had a lot of their family matter or general issue, but they have no way to explain the anyone what they are suffering. Oh, this is the reason the female are going Malaysia. And for in the student, recently some student when I asked with them, they reply that they cannot see any future in the refugee camp. So they decide the way they can. All the people have their special reason why they are going to Malaysia, why they are going to Myanmar. But the condition of the refugee camp is not the place to live for the people. One more second, all things creation from the refugee camp. The people are not safe at all in the night, especially educated person and the activist leader, CBU, leading person are not safe at all in the refugee camp. This is the reason in the recently you all know through the Mazia or the Chodot in the refugee camp, Zamtulu is called 10 number 15. But for their family are not getting justice until now. Even the Muhibullah issue, his family are not getting enough justice of his massacre, his assassination and the murder. Think about this, all are things we see. The thing is that people are not happy in the refugee camp. They try and decide what they can able they can to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Another thing, for example, maybe there is the person who are running the project in the refugee camp. In the next 2 days, 25 August, is the Rohingya genocide remembered. But NGO are not willing to give 1 day off to their volunteers, the Rohingya people, to commemorate and celebrate 25 August Rohingya genocide remembered. It is very hard in our heart. The NGO who are working for us in the refugee camp, even they are not ready to give one holiday or the off day for the volunteer to commemorate and celebrate the Rohingya genocide. Remember, we appreciate the MSF. MSF already decided for this one. In the reason we made with the MSF, and we especially request them, if you are working really for the Rohingya people, please listen one of our voice. That is, please stop working in the refugee camp 25 August, especially the Rohingya volunteer. And they listen our voice. They already order and they are already saying that in 25 August, the off day for the Rohingya volunteer, they will pay on that day also. Everyone should be like that. We are willing, we are saying, we are recommending everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kokemang, for I think once again bringing up this some of the key issues and concerns in the camp, and obviously the deteriorating living conditions in the camps leave people with no choice but to leave the country or the camps, and people find no hope. People are losing hope in the refugee camps, and there is a stronger need for the international community to have a more comprehensive response to the Rohingya crisis that address root causes and improve the immediate living conditions, security concerns in the refugee camps. And so just before wrapping up this session, so I'd like to thank you again to our speakers for your incredible contributions and insights today. And thank you for all the work that you do. And also our speakers today actually has reminded us how important it is for the international community not to lose sight of Rohingya genocide, and again, stepping up with the meaningful support to the displaced Rohingya survivors, so that we may be able to reduce the severe consequences and human suffering, as Omay was describing in her remark earlier. And I too voice their thoughts and contribution today with the hope that the perpetrators of most grave international crimes will be held accountable. And as a member of the Rohingya community, I myself truly hope that the international community will pursue further actions to protect Burma's most marginalized and vulnerable populations and prevent further atrocities from being perpetrated against them and across the country today. And finally, I would like to thank the organizers, Refugee Internationals and INGOs partner for making this event meaningful and for organizing the event and giving the voice of the Rohingya at the center, bringing up the true voice of the Rohingya and willing to listen and hear our voices, what we have to say. And hopefully I think this will lead us to a better conditions, better situations for the Rohingya and with the Rohingya, and lead us to a better finding better solutions together with the community and for the community, and hopefully one day we'll be able to bring justice. So thank you again, everyone who joined us today, and I wish you all the best. Have a good day or good evening wherever you are.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.